Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar stood at the edge of a shallow Italian river, staring down a decision that would define history. The Rubicon wasn't just water, it was a line you weren't allowed to cross with an army. Doing so meant civil war. But Caesar had enemies in Rome who wanted him stripped of power, and he knew if he returned without his army, he'd likely be arrested or killed. So in a quiet moment that changed everything, he muttered, "Let the die be cast," and crossed. That one step didn't just spark war. It ended the Roman Republic and made Caesar a legend, a single river, a single decision, and the fall of a system that lasted 500 years. Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great had conquered the vast Persian Empire and pushed all the way to the edge of the known world, India. He dreamed of endless conquest, of reaching the ends of the earth, but after years of brutal battles, his army was exhausted. Facing endless rivers, fierce warriors, and monsoon rains, his soldiers begged him to stop. Alexander faced a tough choice: keep pushing forward into the unknown, or turn back and preserve his army. Against his own ambition, he chose to retreat. That moment showed Alexander was more than a conqueror. He was a leader who knew when to fight and when to listen. It was the decision that saved his legacy. Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan rose from a harsh childhood to unite the Mongol tribes into a fearsome army. After conquering vast lands in Asia, he faced a critical decision. Should he stop and enjoy his empire, or push west into unknown territory? When the Khwarezmian Empire killed his diplomats, he saw it as a direct challenge. Invading the West meant risking everything: long supply lines, unfamiliar lands, fierce enemies. But Genghis chose to strike. His decision unleashed one of history's greatest conquests, spreading fear and reshaping civilizations from Asia to Europe. It was a gamble that turned a regional power into a global force. Cleopatra. Cleopatra wasn't just a queen, she was a master of survival in a world ruled by men and empires. Egypt was powerful but vulnerable, caught between Rome's growing influence and internal chaos. When Julius Caesar arrived, Cleopatra faced her toughest choice: trust this foreign general and ally with Rome, or risk losing her throne and her country's independence. She famously smuggled herself into Caesar's presence wrapped in a carpet, bold, clever, and daring. That alliance gave her power, but also pulled Egypt into Rome's brutal civil wars. Cleopatra's gamble was high risk, but it kept Egypt alive, at least for a while, and forever etched her name into history. Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon was at the height of his power, ruling much of Europe and dreaming of an empire that would last centuries. But in 1812, he faced a monumental choice: whether to invade Russia, a vast and harsh land known for swallowing armies whole. Despite warnings and doubts, he decided to march east with over 600,000 men. What followed was a disaster: harsh winters, scorched earth tactics by the Russians, and dwindling supplies. His army was decimated, and his dream of European domination shattered. Napoleon's decision to invade Russia became one of history's greatest military blunders, proving even the greatest leaders can be undone by a single risky choice. George Washington. After years of leading the American Revolution and defeating the British, George Washington stood as the most powerful man in the new United States. He could have easily crowned himself king and seized absolute power, just like European monarchs. But Washington made a different choice. He stepped away from power and returned to his farm, setting an example that the new nation would be a democracy, not a monarchy. This decision wasn't easy. It meant giving up control and trusting others to lead. Washington's refusal to become king laid the foundation for American democracy and earned him the title Father of his Country. Abraham Lincoln. In the middle of America's bloodiest conflict, President Abraham Lincoln faced a monumental choice: whether to free the enslaved people in the rebellious southern states. The Civil War was tearing the nation apart, and many worried that declaring emancipation might push the border states to join the Confederacy or hurt the fragile unity of the North. Yet Lincoln understood that slavery was the heart of the conflict, and that freedom was the moral cause worth fighting for. Issuing the Emancipation Proclamation changed the war's purpose. It became a fight not just to save the Union, but to end slavery forever. This courageous decision redefined America and paved the way for civil rights. Winston Churchill. In 1940, Britain stood alone against Nazi Germany. The German war machine had crushed much of Europe, and Hitler offered peace, but at a terrible price: Britain's surrender and loss of freedom. Winston Churchill, newly appointed prime minister, faced a brutal choice: accept a forced peace to save lives now, or stand firm and risk total destruction. Churchill chose defiance. His speeches rallied a battered nation, turning despair into unyielding resolve. "We shall never surrender," he declared, knowing the coming years would be dark and dangerous. That refusal to negotiate kept Britain fighting and changed the course of World War II forever. Franklin D. Roosevelt. For years, Franklin D. Roosevelt watched from afar as war engulfed Europe and Asia. The United States was torn between isolationism and intervention, with many Americans unwilling to join another distant conflict. Then, in December 1941, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, forcing Roosevelt's hand. He had to decide: keep America out of the war or lead the nation into a global conflict that would demand immense sacrifice. Choosing war was a gamble with the nation's future. Roosevelt rallied the country, transformed its economy, and guided the Allies toward victory. His decision reshaped the world order and cemented America's role as a superpower. Joseph Stalin. In 1939, Europe was on the brink of war, with Nazi Germany growing aggressive and the Soviet Union wary of conflict. Joseph Stalin faced a difficult choice: ally with Western powers who distrusted him, or make a shocking deal with Hitler. Stalin chose to sign the Nazi-Soviet Pact, a non-aggression treaty that stunned the world. It gave the USSR time to prepare for war, but also allowed Hitler to invade Poland and start World War II. This decision bought Stalin a dangerous peace, but unleashed catastrophe across Europe. It was a gamble that delayed the inevitable, but changed the course of history forever. Adolf Hitler. By 1941, Adolf Hitler had conquered much of Europe. But he made one fateful decision that would cost him everything: invading the Soviet Union while still fighting Britain in the West. Fighting a two-front war stretched his forces too thin and ignored warnings from his generals. The brutal Russian winter, vast distances, and fierce Soviet resistance turned the invasion into a nightmare. This choice doomed Nazi Germany's chances of victory and led directly to its collapse. Hitler's gamble to open a second front showed how overconfidence and reckless ambition can bring even the mightiest leaders down. Mahatma Gandhi. In a time of violence and rebellion, Mahatma Gandhi made a radical choice: to fight British colonial rule with nonviolence or satyagraha. But when his peaceful protests were met with harsh crackdowns and suffering grew, Gandhi faced a personal test. He turned to hunger strikes, refusing food to pressure oppressors and awaken conscience. This was a risky gamble with his own life, but it showed the world that courage and moral strength could challenge even the mightiest empire. His hunger strikes became powerful symbols of resistance, inspiring millions and eventually leading India to independence. Harry S. Truman. When Harry S. Truman became U.S. President in 1945, World War II was raging and Japan showed no signs of surrender. Truman faced a harrowing choice: invade Japan and risk hundreds of thousands of American and Japanese lives, or use a terrifying new weapon, the atomic bomb. With the weight of millions of lives on his shoulders, he chose to drop the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The decision ended the war, but unleashed unprecedented destruction and ethical debate. Truman's choice shaped the nuclear age and the future of global warfare forever. John F. Kennedy. In 1962, the world teetered on the edge of nuclear war. Soviet missiles had been secretly installed in Cuba, just 90 miles from the U.S. mainland. President John F. Kennedy faced the most dangerous choice of his career: launch an all-out attack and risk full-scale nuclear war, or find a way to defuse the crisis peacefully. Kennedy chose a naval blockade, demanding the removal of the missiles while avoiding direct conflict. His calm, calculated approach kept the world from destruction and showed the power of careful leadership during a time of immense danger. Mikhail Gorbachev. When Mikhail Gorbachev became leader of the Soviet Union in the 1980s, he faced a crumbling economy, growing unrest, and demands for reform. His toughest choice was whether to hold tight to power and crush the growing movements, or to open the system with policies like glasnost and perestroika. Gorbachev chose reform and allowed more freedom of speech and political openness, hoping to save the Soviet Union. Instead, these decisions accelerated its collapse, ending decades of Cold War tension, but dissolving the empire he once ruled. It was a painful choice, choosing change over control and freedom over fear. Vladimir Lenin. In 1918, Russia was drowning in World War I and torn by revolution. Vladimir Lenin faced a brutal choice: continue fighting a devastating war or make peace with Germany, even if it meant giving up huge parts of Russian land. He chose peace, signing the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. It was unpopular and painful, losing territory and resources, but Lenin believed it was necessary to preserve the new Bolshevik government. This decision let him focus on consolidating power at home, but it came at a high price, sacrificing land to secure the future of the revolution. Fidel Castro. In the early 1960s, Fidel Castro was leading Cuba through a tense revolution, caught between powerful forces like the United States and the Soviet Union. His toughest decision came when he agreed to allow Soviet nuclear missiles on Cuban soil. This move was meant to protect Cuba from U.S. invasion, but brought the world to the brink of nuclear war during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Castro's gamble risked global destruction, but it also showed his determination to defend his revolution at all costs. This decision forever tied Cuba's fate to Cold War tensions. Nelson Mandela. After spending 27 years imprisoned fighting apartheid in South Africa, Nelson Mandela faced a moment that could have shattered a nation. Upon his release, he had a choice: demand harsh revenge against those who oppressed him and his people, or choose forgiveness and work toward peaceful reconciliation. Mandela chose the latter, believing that unity was the only path to lasting peace. His decision to forgive not only helped avoid a civil war, but also paved the way for a new democratic South Africa. Mandela's courage in choosing mercy over bitterness became a global symbol of hope and leadership. Margaret Thatcher. In 1982, Margaret Thatcher, the Iron Lady of Britain, faced a sudden crisis when Argentina invaded the Falkland Islands, a small British territory in the South Atlantic. Thatcher's toughest decision was whether to send a naval task force thousands of miles to retake the islands, a risky and expensive military gamble. Some advisors warned against it, fearing heavy losses and political fallout, but Thatcher stood firm, believing Britain's honor and sovereignty were at stake. Her decision led to a victorious, though costly, campaign that boosted national pride and secured her political legacy. Barack Obama. In 2011, after years of hunting the world's most wanted terrorist, Barack Obama faced a critical choice: approve a high-risk covert raid deep inside Pakistan to capture or kill Osama bin Laden, or hold back and risk missing the chance forever. The mission was dangerous, with no guaranteed success, and the potential for international conflict if it failed. Obama decided to give the green light. The operation succeeded, delivering a major blow to al-Qaeda and sending a powerful message about America's resolve. This decision showed bold leadership and shaped the fight against terrorism for years to come. George W. Bush. In 2003, George W. Bush faced a moment that would define his presidency: whether to invade Iraq based on intelligence suggesting weapons of mass destruction. The decision was controversial. Many questioned the evidence and feared the consequences of war. But Bush chose to act, believing it was necessary to protect the United States and promote democracy. The invasion toppled Saddam Hussein, but led to years of conflict, instability, and debate about the war's justification. Bush's choice reshaped the Middle East and sparked a global conversation about intervention and power. Angela Merkel. In 2015, Europe faced a refugee crisis unlike any in recent history. Thousands fleeing war and persecution sought safety, and Germany was at the heart of the storm. Angela Merkel faced a defining choice: close Germany's borders to protect national interests or open them to over 1 million refugees. Merkel chose humanity, welcoming refugees and insisting on solidarity. Her decision sparked debate, but also showed leadership rooted in compassion and courage, reshaping Germany's identity and Europe's approach to migration. Vladimir Putin. In 2022, Vladimir Putin made a decision that shocked the world, launching a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. This move was a high-stakes gamble, risking international sanctions, economic isolation, and a prolonged conflict. Putin aimed to reassert Russian influence over former Soviet territories, but the invasion united many Ukrainians in fierce resistance and triggered a global crisis. The decision reshaped global geopolitics, challenging alliances and redefining power balances. Putin's choice showed the risks leaders take when they gamble on war. Kim Jong Un. As the young leader of North Korea, Kim Jong Un faced a daunting challenge: how to secure his regime's survival amid intense international pressure and sanctions. His toughest decision was to rapidly advance North Korea's nuclear weapons program, developing missiles capable of reaching distant countries. This move was a gamble that risked catastrophic conflict, but gave Kim leverage in global diplomacy. By choosing to prioritize nuclear development, he strengthened his grip on power, while escalating tensions worldwide, making North Korea a key player in international security. Theodore Roosevelt. At the dawn of the 20th century, Theodore Roosevelt faced a bold choice that would change global trade forever. To build a canal linking the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, he supported Panama's independence from Colombia and quickly secured rights to construct the Panama Canal. It was a risky, controversial move, intervening in another country's affairs and backing a rebellion. But Roosevelt believed controlling the canal was crucial for American power and commerce. His decision reshaped the Americas and showcased a new, assertive era of U.S. foreign policy. Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. After leading Turkey to independence, Mustafa Kemal Ataturk faced a monumental choice: whether to hold on to the centuries-old Ottoman Caliphate, a religious symbol revered by millions, or to abolish it and push Turkey towards secularism and modernization. Ataturk chose bold reform, believing that separating religion from state power was essential for progress. His decision was controversial and challenged tradition, but it laid the foundation for modern Turkey, transforming it into a secular nationalist republic and changing the region's future forever. Ho Chi Minh. Ho Chi Minh dedicated his life to freeing Vietnam from foreign rule. After decades of colonialism by France and then war with the United States, he faced a relentless struggle to unify his country. His toughest decision was to continue fighting despite overwhelming odds and devastation. Ho Chi Minh chose perseverance over surrender, inspiring his people with hope and determination. His decision shaped Vietnam's future, ending colonialism, but at a huge cost in lives and hardship. Ho Chi Minh's legacy is one of resilience and unwavering commitment to independence. Yitzhak Rabin. As Prime Minister of Israel, Yitzhak Rabin faced a risky choice: pursue peace with the Palestinians or continue decades of conflict. In the 1990s, Rabin chose hope and courage, signing the Oslo Accords, a landmark agreement aiming to end violence and establish Palestinian self-rule. Many in Israel and Palestine opposed the deal, seeing it as betrayal or dangerous compromise. Rabin's decision required immense bravery, risking his political career and personal safety. Tragically, his hope was cut short when he was assassinated by an extremist, yet his choice remains a powerful symbol of the quest for peace. Volodymyr Zelenskyy. When Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, President Volodymyr Zelenskyy faced a terrifying choice: flee the country to save himself or stay and lead his people through the crisis. Despite danger and uncertainty, Zelenskyy chose to stay in Kyiv, inspiring his nation with courage and defiance. His decision boosted Ukrainian morale and drew global support. Refusing to abandon his country at its darkest hour showed remarkable leadership and shaped the ongoing fight for Ukraine's freedom. Boris Yeltsin. In 1993, Russia was a fragile democracy, struggling to move away from decades of Soviet rule. Boris Yeltsin faced a critical moment when the Russian parliament opposed his reforms and refused to step down. His toughest decision was whether to negotiate or use force. Yeltsin chose to order tanks to shell the parliament building, a drastic move to preserve his vision of democracy and maintain control. The decision was controversial and violent, but prevented a potential coup. Yeltsin's choice shaped the future of Russia's political system, for better or worse.